As I mentioned, our Parshat Kedoshim, has a lot of different commandments on all kinds of topics. And most of those commandments seem to be between people, as opposed to purely ritual commandments between us and Hashem. And the first commandments with which it starts is every person should fear their mother and father and keep Shabbat. My sabbaths, literally. So a few things can be said about this. First of all, why is the order first mother then father? And secondly, what does Shabbat have to do with any of this? It seems to be somehow that the verse puts them together. There are actually a lot of such similar questions about this parsha in particular. A lot of times, 2 or 3 commandments seem to be put in the same verse. And there is a question of to what extent are they related? Is this the second commandment in the same verse is usually throws some light on the first one as well, or what? And the ending of the verse is, I'm Hashem, I'm God. So again, a lot of the verses in our Parsha end like this. Usually, our sages teach us that whenever it says such a thing is to emphasize that it's Hashem who knows exactly what the person is doing. A lot of these commandments, even though they're commandments between people, one might think that they can deceive the other people and make it look like they're not breaking any commandment. So that's why Hashem keeps emphasizing, I'm the one watching, and I'll make sure to give reward to the ones that do keep that commandment, and will punish the one who does not. Even though you might be a very respectable member of society, you might look like you're doing everything right, but I know if you're doing it right or not. So in particular with regards to respecting and taking care of parents, a lot of times, of course, children can make it look like they're doing the right thing without actually doing it. When they, for instance, could have done something for their parents, but they have all kinds of excuses, and nobody else except Hashem knows if these excuses are real or not. There was one individual, for instance, who lived in a different city, and this was in Poland maybe 100 years ago, and he never visited his father who lived far away. So when the rabbi asked him, how come you're doing this? He said, well, it costs money. I don't have to spend money on this mitzvah. So the rabbi told him, okay, so walk on foot. Okay, it costs money to travel there, so you could walk on foot. A lot of times people find all kinds of excuses, but it's only Hashem who knows to what extent these excuses are true. I remember I had a co-worker, another Orthodox Jew working with us, and he had a very elderly father. And we work as programmers. Of course, it's quite a demanding job. And a lot of times when he would talk to his father, during daytime, he would be very short and he would explain why he's busy. And I knew that this is correct. He is extremely busy. And, at work, it's not really, he doesn't have the luxury to discuss things with his father. He could maybe say a few words, but later when the job is done, then he could spend more time with his father. So the point is that it's only a lot of times nobody really knows. Similarly, a person may be doing nothing at their work, and or a person who is not particularly busy and still may use a similar excuse. The father would never know if this person is really busy or he just doesn't want to spend any time on the phone with his father. Whatever the case may be, this is just a guess that might be why Hashem's name appears at the end of this verse, but there could be many other reasons. Many other examples could be given. But let's get back to my first questions. So with regards to the question of why the mother is mentioned first, actually the Talmud talks about it. As I mentioned on the previous video, the main place in the Talmud where respecting parents is discussed, as well as respecting elders and many other similar commandments, it's in Parshat Kedoshim. Interesting. There is no tractate in the Talmud that deals with just that commandment, respecting parents. There's no such tractate. So the main commandments that have to do with what children have to do for their parents is put together in the tractate that deals with marriage. once people marry, they have children, so the father has to do certain things for their child, and then the child has to do certain things for his or her parents. So it says that the reason why it first says in 10 so-called 10 commandments, as I mentioned in a different video, it's not really correct to translate Aseret HaDvarim, 10 commandments. The more correct translation would be Aseret HaDvarim, or Aseret HaDibrot would be 10 sayings or 10 statements, because there are more than 10 commandments in the so-called 10 commandments. But using the English terms, 10 commandments, the Aseret HaDvarim, so there it says, respect your father and mother. The father is mentioned first. And here in our Parsha, which by the way is very similar, the Chazal already mentioned that it's a lot of parallels between the 10 sayings, the Aseret HaDvarim, and in our Parsha. But at any rate, when our Parsha starts, it says the mother first. And it says about fear. So there are two mitzvot, respecting and fearing, or showing signs of yira, whatever it's. The Talmud discusses the differences between kavod and yira, these two things, two concepts, the respect and the fear. So, in particular, it says that the father is usually by default less respected than the mother, but feared more. So that's why the Torah always reverses, starts with the less obvious case, meaning you should fear your mother and father, right? The person usually fears father more, so therefore it starts with the mother. And in the 10 sayings in Aseret HaDvarim, it says you should respect your father and mother, because a person by default would be respecting his mom more, so therefore it says father first. Interesting explanation, right? The person would generally respect his mother more than his father, but would fear his father more than his mother. Now, what does it have to do with Shabbat, any of this? Well, besides that these two, in a sense, are key commandments, one between people and one between us and Hashem. One of the most important commandments, the most central commandment in Judaism, that is the ritual commandment, is Shabbat. That's what basically a lot of times when Jews are called observant, the main litmus test in a sense is the Shabbat. Say Shomer Shabbos or not Shomer Shabbos. A person who is Shomer Shabbos is already belongs basically to the klal, to the loyal Jews who keep commandments. Because if you say that a kosher Jew is a Jew that has absolutely no sins at all, that would be very hard to find, because every person almost gets something's wrong sometimes. So if a person, for instance, spoke something bad about somebody, is he already a wicked person? I mean, you have to try whatever you have to do tshuva. We do sins. I mean, most people are not fully 100% righteous. So I guess there's a litmus test. Usually Shabbat is used. A person who keeps Shabbat, at least openly doesn't desecrate Shabbat, that's usually the people who are considered, I don't want to use the word orthodox. Orthodox is a very late term, but whatever. The observant Jews, in a certain sense, Shabbat is always the litmus test. So Shabbat is almost the most important ritual commandment. And of course, it's in the Aseret HaDvarim, also in these 10 sayings. And then the most important, probably, commandment between people, I would say, is respecting parents and fearing parents. Because there's no greater Hakarat HaTov. An essential principle of Judaism is to realize the people who did good to you and to pay them back in good. To actually not try to... You see, natural reaction is a lot of people are more willing to do good to some stranger than to a person who actually they owe something to, because nobody wants to admit they owe something to someone. Not nobody, but a lot of people. So that's why it's very hard, actually, to be makir tov. So Hakarat HaTov is an incredibly important principle. And the greatest Hakarat HaTov is generally to the parents, because no matter what parents we have, a lot of times in a modern Western society, especially people who have various issues, they go to a psychologist. A lot of times the psychologist will blame everything on the parents, or at least a lot of the blame. And a lot of times the younger people don't owe their parents anything. They don't feel like they owe them anything. And in fact, a lot of times they'll feel that it's the parents who were not good parents, and they didn't do enough for them. And therefore there are plenty of young people who barely talk to their parents or want to do anything for their parents when they're old and when they need their kids now. All this time when they were young and when they were small, the parents did so much for them. It's unbelievable how much parents do for their kids. And a lot of times in the Western society, unfortunately, the kids never recognize it, and the general mood of society, the general modus operandi or whatever of the people today is that they don't really respect or ever admit to all the good that they got from their parents. Whatever the case may be, respecting parents is probably one of the most, maybe the most important commandment between people. In a way, again, in Aseret HaDvarim, after the commandments between us and Hashem, the first of the commandments that's between us and between people is respecting parents. Now, of course, it's according to the accepted way of dividing the 10 sayings. It's still in the first luach because it's compared to respecting parents is compared to respecting Hashem. That's why it's the last of the first 5 commandments, or rather statements, sayings. Normally, we would expect it to be on the second luach, where the commandments between people are, but it's the last of those that still are on the first luach, because it's still considered, in a sense, commandment between us and Hashem. Respect of parents is, as the Talmud tells us, is similar in a sense as people who usually respect their parents will respect Hashem as well. I mean, there is certain similarity between the ideas. That do you accept that Hashem gave you everything good, and do you accept that all these things that parents did for you? Well, whatever the case may be, so one might think that the reason the Parshat Kedoshim starts with these 2 commandments is because both are similar in a sense that one is one of the most important signs that we accept Hashem, the keeping of Shabbat, the acceptance of creation of the world, and the fact that Hashem saved us from Egyptian slavery. That's what Shabbat, the testimony of Shabbat is about, at least according to a simple level. And the respecting of the parents, where we accept and recognize the good that their parents did. And in fact, of course, in the 10 sayings, they're also next to each other. Shabbat, and then the 4th, according to the regular division, as I said, the 4th saying is Shabbat, the 5th is respecting parents. I know there are other divisions, by the way, not only by certain Christians, Catholics, for instance, divide differently, but actually in the Jewish tradition there was an alternative division. There were other ways to divide the 10 sayings, but I'm talking about the most standard, the most common way of dividing them, where all the 5 first sayings have Hashem Elokecha, the name of Hashem, whereas the last 5 don't have, and that's what the 5 and the 2 luchot were. So, in any case, these 2 commandments go next to, they follow each other. So here in Parshat Kedoshim, again, we start with these 2 commandments, although they're in the opposite order. First, fearing mother and father, then keeping Shabbat. But what's more is what Chazal tell us, that with all that respecting parents is so important, we cannot break Shabbat or any other commandment in order to respect parents. And by the way, it's not necessarily talking about the case where the parents just want a person to break Shabbat. There are cases like that today, plenty. So many religious Jews whose children become religious and they're not happy about it. They would rather that their children would be like them. So they would rather that their children don't keep Shabbat. Well, it's not necessarily that that's the case it's talking about. Some commentators say that it's talking about a situation where the parent needs something on Shabbat. Right? The parent says, I like warm food. Please warm me some soup on Shabbat or something like that. Things that are forbidden on Shabbat. So we're not allowed to break commandments even in order to help an elderly parent. Unless, of course, there is a danger for life, then Shabbat is broken like other commandments. But when simply the convenience of the father and the respect of the father while being so important, of course it doesn't override any commandment of the Torah. Or even rabbinical commandments, by the way. So that's what our sages tell us based on these verses. And I'm going to end on this. If you like this video, please press like and please subscribe to our channel.